YeHoVah so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Yeshua came, and Yeshua, by the way, kept the feasts of YeHoVah. Yeshua kept the spring feast of YeHoVah. Yeshua kept the fall feast of YeHoVah. Today, in Spirit-Filled Living, we're going to be talking about the fall feast of YeHoVah, and we'll bring this teaching to a conclusion, so stay tuned for the fall feast of YeHoVah. We'll be right back. Not even realizing that it is not the mind of the Messiah. I look forward to seeing you in that live stream chat, and so please join us. You know, that is powerful stuff, watching people transform. Shalom and welcome to Spirit-Filled Living. I'm your host, Arthur Bailey, and I'm excited about today's message, the Fall Feast of YeHoVah. I want you to stay tuned because we've got some important information to share with you on this important subject. I also want to take a moment and invite you and your family to join us at House of Israel here in the beautiful city of Charlotte, North Carolina. House of Israel is a spirit-filled new covenant community that actively teach the Hebrew roots of the Christian faith. The Hebrew roots of the Christian faith is the faith once delivered to the saints. We meet every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. at 1334 Hill Road here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We also meet on Thursday at 7 p.m. for our Thursday discipleship and leadership training. You and your family will be blessed as you come and share fellowship with us in our Sabbath service, where we have teaching and then prayer. We also have opportunities to get your questions answered, and then we break bread together in fellowship every Saturday at 11 a.m. I know you and your family will be blessed by joining us in fellowship. Now, if you stay outside of the Charlotte area and would like to join us, you can do that live on the internet at ArthurBaileyMinistries.com. That's ArthurBaileyMinistries.com. Click on the live broadcast, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Saturdays and 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. Now, stay tuned for today's teaching, the Fall Feast of YeHoVah. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
In keeping of the Fall Feast of YeHoVah, you will learn about our Creator and His expectation for His creation. In Arthur Bailey's teaching, The Fall Feast of YeHoVah, he will not only provide insight and understanding of the prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come, but will help each of us understand how to celebrate these amazing days in ways that pleases YeHoVah. We will learn how to approach the Almighty, how to worship Him in the ways He wants to be worshiped, and how to be found well-pleasing in His sight.
The Fall Feast of YeHoVah is a must-have for every true believer. In this teaching, I explain the significance of the Fall Feast of YeHoVah and their importance in the believer's life today. You need this teaching.
Now, for your gift of $65 or more, Arthur would like to send this DVD collection, The Fall Feast of YeHoVah. Call the number on your screen, visit our website, or write Arthur Bailey Ministries, P.O. Box 1182, Fort Mill, South Carolina, 29716.
You know, that is powerful stuff, watching people transform. Each week, we receive letters from viewers like you who have questions that they would like us to answer or prayer requests that they would like us to pray over. And so I want to encourage you to write us. Let us know how we're doing. Let us know if this broadcast is blessing or if it is benefiting you. If there's something that you would like us to teach or to share that you find interesting or important. So please write us. Today, we receive questions, and one of the questions that we received has to do with the commandments. There are many today who are teaching that we're not obligated to keep the commandments of God. Now, it's interesting that people actually believe that, and not only do they believe that, they literally teach that we do not have to keep the commandments of YeHoVah. Well, I want to take you to a couple of places in the Bible that Yeshua writes and lets us know, and then, of course, his disciples. In the book of Matthew, verse number 17 of Matthew chapter 5, think not that I've come to destroy the law or the prophets. I've not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And that doesn't mean that he came to do away with them. It means that he came to show us how to live them the way they were designed to be lived. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law to all be fulfilled. We know that everything in the law and the prophets have not been fulfilled because heaven and earth is still here. Whoever therefore shall break one of the least, he says, whoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments and shall teach men so shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Now, I used to think, well, if I am called the least in the kingdom, then of course I'm in the kingdom. But did you know that everything that is created was created by YeHoVah? Have you ever asked where hell is? Is it outside the kingdom? Where the lake of fire is it outside the kingdom? Is it in some place where YeHoVah has not created? The fact is that heaven and hell is in the kingdom, but those who are in hell, those who are in the lake of fire, those whose carcasses are strewn over the desert, over the wilderness, those who come up to worship the Almighty will see him. It is in a place that people will see and know, because they will be cast in who refuse to keep the commandments of YeHoVah. So we see the least in the kingdom is not a good place. It's not that you're in the kingdom, you're just on the low rent district. I hate to put it that way, but it is not a good place to be. In the book of John, Yeshua makes it very clear in chapter number 14, he says that if we believe on him, we will do the works that he did. In verse number 15, he says, if you love me, you will keep my commandments. It's that simple. And then, of course, in Revelations chapter 14, verse number 17, we find that if we keep his commandments and have the testimony of Yeshua, then we are part of his. Revelations 12, likewise, those who have the testimony of Yeshua and who keep the commandments of God. The answer to the question is we are still responsible for the commandments today. Stay tuned. Our announcer has some things to share with you, and I'll be right back.
And God spoke these words unto Moses, remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God.
In his paradigm-changing book, Sunday is Not the Sabbath, Dr. Arthur Bailey gives Bible-based truth about the Sabbath and how the Holy Spirit led him to these discoveries.
I believe that every believer should have a copy of this book, Sunday is Not the Sabbath.
I found this book to be sound, full of light, and with great direction. This is one of the best books written substantiating that Sunday is not the Sabbath. The material is well organized, clearly presented, and biblically based.
Call the number on your screen with your gift of $20 or more, and Arthur Bailey will send you his compelling must-read book, Sunday is Not the Sabbath, or visit our website at www.arthurbaileyministries.com.
You know, that is powerful stuff, watching people transform. In keeping the feasts of YeHoVah, we learn how to worship the Almighty the way he has prescribed in his word, how we are to worship him, how we are to approach him, and how we are to walk in the blessings that he has ordained for those who diligently hearken to keep his commandments according to Deuteronomy 28. We know that the feast of YeHoVah, and we've talked about the feast of YeHoVah, and today we want to bring this particular teaching to a closing because the feast or the fall feast of YeHoVah are quickly approaching. In Leviticus chapter 23, we found in verse number 23, that these are the feasts of YeHoVah that was spoken to Moses. It's not the law of Moses, it's the law of YeHoVah that was given to Moses to give to the children of Israel. And we note that in verse number 24, it says, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, you shall have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets, a holy convocation. Over time, traditions have come into the faith once delivered to the saints and have usurped the importance of the word by traditions. Yeshua warned his disciples that they were to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of the Sadducees, as well as the leaven of Herod. They thought, since they had gathered all of the bread from feeding the 4,000 and the 5,000, that that he may have been upset with them because they didn't have bread. When he perceived what they were thinking, he said, I'm not speaking this to you because you have no bread. What I'm telling you is that you need to beware of the teachings. The doctrine or the leaven that he was speaking of was the teachings of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. The Sadducees, their ministry was defunct once the temple was no longer in operation because the Sadducees controlled the temple. The Pharisees established the synagogue system, and today, modern day Phariseeism is what we know today as Orthodox Judaism. With Orthodox Judaism and Judaism in any form, it is the tradition of the elders, which Yeshua said that his disciples were to beware of. He says because these individuals were teaching 4 commandments, the traditions of the elders, and that their worship was in vain. Traditions have a tendency to render true worship into vain worship. And so individuals were practicing the traditions that had been handed down through the elders of Israel from generation to generation, known in Yeshua's day as the traditions of men. We're not to keep the traditions of men, we are to keep the commandments of YeHoVah. Now, these commandments over time have been changed in many ways to recognize the tradition, and one of the main traditions, the biggest tradition that is known in modern day Judaism, is what is known as Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, by definition, is head of the year. Rosh Hashanah in modern Judaism is celebrated in place of Yom Teruah, the Feast of Trumpets. Here in Leviticus chapter 23, we find that this is the first day of the 7th month. The 7th month is not the beginning of the year. The 7th month is the 7th month, but Judaism made the 7th month the head of the year, or the first month of the year, by having a new year celebration called Rosh Hashanah, which is the celebration of the Jewish New Year. However, YeHoVah established the first month of the year, and he did that in Exodus chapter 12. In Exodus chapter 12, when he brings the children of Israel out of Egypt, he establishes, he says, YeHoVah spoke unto Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. Now, it's important for us to understand this because he says, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. Now, why is this important that we look at this month as the beginning of months? And he spoke unto Moses and Aaron and said, this month is the beginning of months for you, is because every culture around Egypt at that time had a beginning of months. They had what is known as a new year. Here in America, The new year is celebrated January 1st. Amazing, the new year is celebrated in pretty much the almost middle of winter. YeHoVah established the new year to coincide with the spring. So he says in Exodus 12, "This month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Forget what everybody else is doing. Egypt has their new year. Babylon has their new year. The Assyrians, the Phoenicians, the Iranians, or whoever, they have their new year. And therefore, for you, this month is the month of the Aviv. The month of the Aviv is the month that the Passover is celebrated on the 14th day of the month. Now that's important, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, you'll get caught up in Jewish traditions, and these Jewish traditions will have you celebrating the feast of YeHoVah in a different time other than the day and time in which he has prescribed these feasts to be celebrated. This year, the fall feast of YeHoVah, as in every year, is the 7th month, beginning with the Feast of Trumpets, and that is the month of Tishrei. The month of Tishrei coincides with the Gregorian calendar month of September or October, depending on where it falls, and it begins with the sighting of the renewed moon. Now, the question becomes, how do you celebrate these particular feasts? What is required? In each of the feasts, we know that there is the responsibility of the priests and there are the responsibility of the people. The responsibility of the priest is to make the sacrificial offerings that were required by YeHoVah. Now, it's important because many will argue today, how can you keep the feasts of God? How can you keep the law when you cannot keep or sacrifice the sacrifices that were required? Well, ladies and gentlemen, my response to that is that the people was never responsible for the sacrifices. As a matter of fact, YeHoVah he selected the tribe of Levi, and from the lineage of Aaron, he established the high priest system, or the high priesthood. The descendants of Aaron was to take on the priestly line, and the Levites were responsible for the work of the tabernacle and later on the temple. The average Israelite or the Israelite families was never required to, as a matter of fact, they could not even touch the altar. They could not make a sacrifice on the altar, for it would have been a strange fire or an illegal offering, and those who did such thing according to Scripture typically were put to death. So the Israelite, the ordinary individual, the people were never responsible for sacrifices. They were forbidden to offer a sacrifice in any town or any city or within any gate. They specifically had to bring their offering and present their offering to the priest. That is still required today, that we are to bring our offering and present it to YeHoVah. And so YeHoVah said 3 times a year his people were to come up before them, and none were to appear before him empty-handed. They were to celebrate in the presence of YeHoVah, and it was the high priest and the priests and Levites who did the sacrifices within the temple services. Now, what is the requirement of the people for Yom Teruah, or the Feast of Trumpets? Now, you'll notice that the Feast of Trumpets coincide with what Yeshua talked about and what Paul wrote about when he talked about when the last trump has to do with the judgment. It has to do with the actual judgment that will take place in the last days, and it is the last trump, and it is believed that the Feast of Trumpets is the heralding of the last day. Now, when we begin to look at the Feast of Trumpet up until then, how do we keep the Feast of Trumpets? Well, what is required in the book of Leviticus is pretty simple. In the Feast of Trumpet, an individual was required to blow the shofar. Verse number 24. Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, in the 1st day of the month, shall you have a Sabbath, a memorial of blowing of trumpets. That is the responsibility of the people. Now, the actual Hebrew is the day of shouting, or Yom Teruah, which is the day of shouting. So if a person doesn't have a shofar, they can go out and at the top of their lungs, they can shout. They can shout unto YeHoVah with the voice of triumph. They can shout hallelujah. They can shout unto him, no different than a wave offering and the other offerings that the people could present before the Almighty. So on the day of trumpets, it is a day of shouting. There is the responsibility of the people to hold a Sabbath day, a sacred gathering, a holy convocation. There's the responsibility of the priest to offer the sacrifices that was required. Since the temple is no longer in disarray, then those portions of the festivals cannot be honored. The day will come, however, when the place that YeHoVah puts his name, the new heaven, the new earth, the new Jerusalem, all of the children of Israel. As a matter of fact, I want us to go over to the book of Zechariah in chapter number 14, 16. And it shall come to pass that everyone that is left of all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall even go up from year to year to worship the King YeHoVah of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacle. And it shall be that whosoever will not come up at all, the families of the earth, unto Jerusalem to worship the King YeHoVah of hosts, even upon them shall be no rain. And if the family of Egypt go not up and come not, that have no rain, there shall be the plague wherewith YeHoVah will smite the heathen that come not up. You see this? Every person who does not come up is considered a heathen. And he will smite the heathen that do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all nations, all goyim, all Gentiles, all non-believers that come not up to keep the Feast of Tabernacle. So in the new heaven, in the new earth, in the new Jerusalem, all will come up to the feast, and those who do not come up will be smitten. So when it comes down to Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it is a day of afflicting of the soul, which is accustomed to fasting according to Isaiah 58. And then when it comes to the Feast of Tabernacle, and of course Yom Kippur is a holy day, it is a Sabbath day. The Feast of Tabernacle, the first day, is a 7-day feast, but the last day, the last great day, is known as Shemini Atzeret. And that is the last great day, because tabernacle is 7 days, which is now concluding after 7 days. But the 8th day is a holy day, and that is called the last great day. And we can see in the gospel that these days also coincided with the ministry of Yeshua. There's much to be said about Yeshua's ministry concerning the feast of YeHoVah. So we can see during the Feast of Tabernacle, it is the first day, which is the first day of Tabernacle. There is a holy convocation. The last great day, Shemini Atzeret, is a holy convocation. And in between those days, it is the waving of branches of goodly trees. This is celebrating in the presence of YeHoVah. As I've said throughout these teachings, YeHoVah loved to party with his people, and he loved his people to party in his presence. Well, I certainly believe that these teachings will bless you, and remember this teaching in its entirety, the fall feast of YeHoVah. It'll bless you for generations to come. Now, I want you to stay tuned. Our announcer has some things to say, and then I'll be back to bring this teaching to a conclusion.
In his paradigm-changing book, Sunday is Not the Sabbath, Dr. Arthur Bailey gives Bible-based truth about the Sabbath.
I believe that every believer should have a copy of this book, Sunday is Not the Sabbath. Why? Because it is done in such a format that not only will it strengthen your resolve and answer questions that you have concerning the Sabbath, but it will also equip you to be able to answer the questions of others as to why you keep the Sabbath and why Sunday is not the Sabbath.
In keeping of the fall feast of YeHoVah, you will learn about our Creator and His expectation for His creation. In Arthur Bailey's teaching, The Fall Feast of YeHoVah, he will not only provide insight and understanding of the prophetic shadow pictures of good things to come, but will help each of us understand how to celebrate these amazing days in ways that pleases YeHoVah. The Fall Feast of YeHoVah and Sunday is Not the Sabbath. Call the number on your screen today.
You know, that is powerful stuff, watching people transform. Well, I certainly hope you've enjoyed this teaching series, The Fall Feast of YeHoVah. I certainly enjoyed bringing it to you, and I know that this teaching will bless you and your family for generations to come. I encourage you to get your copy of The Fall Feast of YeHoVah, for there's so much more in this teaching that I didn't have time to bring to you in this television program. So make sure you get your copy of The Fall Feast of YeHoVah. Now, I want to pray for you and for your family because there's so much in keeping the feasts of YeHoVah that will bless you. And really, as you begin to keep these feasts, the Almighty begins to reveal Himself in ways that you have not known Him up until now. The Feast of YeHoVah reveals the Almighty the way He wants to be known, and as we walk in His commandments, He begins to reveal Himself to us in a deeper manner. Father, I pray that your people will come to know you as you desire to be known, that you reveal yourself to your people. I know that there are many out there struggling. They're wondering, what are they supposed to do? And I know that you have the plan for each of them wrapped up in your bosom, and you like to reveal that to them as they draw close to you. I pray that you will cause them to desire to know you the way you want to be known, and in return, you reveal yourself and your plan for their lives in Yeshua's name. Amen. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a pleasure being with you. Write in. Let us know how we're doing. Remember, we can't do what we do without you. So support this ministry. Help us to remain on the air and to continue to bring these teachings to you, your family, and so many more. We look forward to joining with you next week. And as always, Yeshua is Lord.